We need greater flexibility, not increased security. Greg's words lingered in the conference room like smoke. My name is Mark Luo. I am 40 years old and the lead security architect at Nexora Labs in Seattle, Washington. For 9 years, I have designed and maintained the security framework safeguarding financial information for over 300 clients. I witnessed 4 chief technology officers come and go. Greg Phelan was the 5th, and after only 2 weeks, he had already labeled me as the issue. These protocols are outdated, he said, while turning pages of my quarterly security review. We are falling behind in deployment speed. Our competitors are moving twice as fast. I kept my tone calm. Those competitors have also suffered breaches. Breaches happen everywhere. Greg dismissed my remark with a wave of his hand. It is about how quickly you recover, not how you prevent. The 6 other team leaders nodded in agreement. No one dared to challenge the new manager except me. Our clients place their trust in us precisely because we have not experienced any breaches, I explained. The financial industry has different demands than the environments I have worked in before. Greg's smile failed to reach his eyes. BlackRock, Citigroup, JP Morgan, I know their financial security standards, he said. What Greg did not realize was that our system was not ordinary. I had built specialized security layers after the board refused to fund enterprise solutions. Proprietary firewall rules, custom identification patterns, and an in-house access control system were all in place. Though the documentation was limited because there was never an allocated moment to properly transfer knowledge. I wanted to guide you through the reasons behind these specific choices. We do not have the time for that today. Greg closed his laptop. Everyone was stretched thin, focused on preparing the new client portal. Let us postpone the conversation about security until after the meeting. Diane from product development stopped me in the corridor. She asked if I was all right. That was tough, I replied. I am okay. She explained that Greg was merely trying to establish his place and encouraged me to give him time to adjust. However, 3 days later, I discovered my access to the security logging server was limited. When I inquired, the help desk informed me this was due to a new policy direct from the Chief Technology Officer's office. Security logs were being merged into the overall IT monitoring platform, a system I had often criticized for lacking sufficiency in detailed forensic investigation. That evening, I saved all my documentation and security notes on my personal drive, not company data, but my own processes, methodologies, and system design. I had a feeling I might require it in the near future. The following morning, my security dashboard alerted me to 3 irregular login attempts detected by my custom monitoring tool. No one else seemed to pay attention. I joined Nexora after spending 5 years at a government contractor. At that time, the company was a small startup, with visionary founders who had more ambition than funding. I was employee number 26. Now the team has grown to over 300 people spread across 2 office buildings. My father had doubts when I left my stable government-related role to join a startup in this environment. I believed in what we were creating, focusing on security first and financial data management long before fintech became a popular term. I had accepted a pay reduction to join, compensated with equity that might have value if we succeeded, and we did. For several years, I worked 80-hour weeks developing our security framework, while other team leaders pushed for more budget and staff. I managed with fewer resources by crafting custom solutions when purchasing ready-made products was not affordable. The pattern was constant. I built everything myself, but there was never enough time to thoroughly document or train others. That became a bottleneck. Our former CTO, Jennifer, warned, "What happens if you get hit by a bus? Whoever replaces you must be skilled at understanding code comments." I joked, but Jennifer grasped the technical debt we were building, while also shielding me from the board's ongoing demands for faster releases and additional features. We had a steady rhythm. I identified potential risks. Jennifer translated these into business consequences, and together we found compromises that maintained our security strength. Then, Nexora was acquired by Vertec Holdings, and Jennifer was replaced by Greg, whose directive was straightforward: speed up growth, simplify operations, and release trapped value, as he expressed during his company-wide introduction. Within a month, I observed significant changes. Security evaluations were shortened to fit aggressive release timelines, penetration tests were postponed and then reduced in scope, and my team's security authorization requests faced increasing resistance. The upgrades had been pushed down on the priority list, Diane noticed. She mentioned it during lunch in the courtyard. They are pushing our sprint capacity to the absolute limit, she said. The quality assurance team was under intense pressure to meet deadlines. I asked about the compliance obligations. We cannot afford to cut any corners there, I insisted. She shrugged and said, Greg claims they are redefining the requirements. Those were his exact words, not mine. Later that evening, my direct report James stopped by my desk. Something odd happened, he said. I was questioned about our firewall rule update process. Greg wants to understand why modifications take so long to put into effect. I asked if he had explained the testing needs. Yes, he replied, but he kept pressing about possible shortcuts for emergency cases. After James left, I sat mesmerized at my screen. 9 years of thorough effort seemed threatened, and now they sought to cut corners. I felt a strong sense that everything was starting to fall apart. The calendar invite arrived on Thursday morning. It was titled Security Restructuring Discussion with Mark, Lou, Greg, and Feline at Conference Room B at 2 p.m. I spent the morning reviewing my security dashboards carefully, one final time. Everything was operating as intended. The custom alert system I had created was actively watching for any strange access behaviors. The separation between client data stores remained intact. Backup validation tests all showed positive results. Right at 2 p.m., I entered Conference Room B. Greg was already there, accompanied by Heather from Human Resources. Mark, please, have a seat. His tone was professional but hollow. I will be direct. We are restructuring the security operation model and making a shift in how we manage things. I responded that the shift was towards a more decentralized method. The presence of HR conveyed everything I needed to understand. Your role as the centralized security architect is being phased out, he stated further. Security responsibilities are now being integrated within each product team, who will manage the essential security framework. I inquired if we were transitioning to cloud-native tools combined with external management services. Greg clarified, this approach is more scalable and less reliant on informal internal knowledge. Informal internal knowledge that I had built over 9 years through custom solutions to safeguard client data was now dismissed as a negative organizational pattern. Heather slid a folder across the table. It detailed the severance package, 2 months' salary, extended health coverage, and accelerated vesting of the equity obtained from the acquisition. I opened the folder and looked through the figures. Reasonable, even quite generous. This decision had been made at a level far beyond Greg. He was merely delivering the message. We will need your access cards and login credentials before you leave today, Greg added. James will oversee any knowledge transfer during the next 2 weeks. You don't have to come into the office, but must remain reachable by phone. James is not familiar with the entire system, I remarked. Nobody is, except me. Greg's face tightened slightly. Everything is well documented, Mark. We have reviewed your wikis and repositories, he said. Documented, yes, but full comprehension of that documentation demanded context I never had the opportunity to provide. The board consistently rejected my proposals for a formal knowledge transfer project, he concluded. We had been told we would clean it up faster later. This had been the repeated message for years. I get it, I thought, as I closed the folder and jotted down my credentials on a notepad. Domain Administrator, VPN Details, Security Console, and Monitoring Systems. 9 years guarding this company's data boiled down to just 8 sets of credentials. Greg gave a knowing nod as I slid the notepad across the table. Change is difficult, he said, but this is the right path for the company. I handed over my access card and rose to leave. I hoped he was correct. Walking through the lobby, I passed the wall displaying awards and press mentions. Nexora Labs' most secure financial data platform for 5 years running. This was my work, my legacy. I didn't feel anger, only a numb certainty that they had made a terrible error, not by firing me, but by believing they actually grasped what they were unraveling. Companies restructure constantly. The true mistake was their confidence in understanding the full impact. Sitting in my car, I switched off my phone and drove to Lake Washington. For an hour I stared at the water, calculating how much time would pass before the first security breach occurred. Not if, but when. 2 days later, my forecast came true, and faster than I had expected. My personal phone buzzed with messages from James. Systems acting strangely. Numerous alert triggers. Can you call? I stared at the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let Greg face the consequences of dismantling a security system he didn't comprehend. But 9 years of experience and instinct won out. I called James. Thank goodness he answered. We have a problem. Strange traffic patterns appeared at the eastern gateway. The monitoring system was signaling an alert, but no one seemed to know how to respond. I asked, "What is Greg saying?" He was tied up in meetings with the board all day. The IT department believed it was likely just a false alarm triggered by the automated rule updates, the very updates I had created to adapt to new threat patterns. If these rules were generating alerts, something unusual was occurring. I inquired if anyone had reviewed the secondary verification logs, but silence followed. I closed my eyes and told James, "There is a secondary validation system that confirms the alert patterns before any flags are raised. If both systems are active, it cannot be a false positive." I guided him through accessing the hidden dashboard. The credentials were missing from my handover notes because it was a system I had developed during a weekend hackathon 3 years earlier. That system had already detected 2 potential breaches since its creation. James whispered, "Both systems are flashing like Christmas lights. You must isolate the eastern gateway immediately." I instructed to shut down the external connection and switch to the backup line. James replied, "I do not have permission for that. No one granted me administrative rights to the network hardware." Of course, in their haste to remove me, they had overlooked transferring complete access privileges. I urged him to contact Greg or someone from senior IT. He hesitated but said he would try. I added, "Can you come in to help manage this situation?" Reluctantly, he admitted, "That is no longer my responsibility, James, please." "Mark, I have no idea why I am here. Part of me wanted to assist, while another part knew I should call Greg and explain everything exactly as I told you. I would be reachable if he needed to get in touch with me." 3 hours later, Greg called Mark, and his voice sounded tense. "We are facing some security problems. I heard James seems to believe it is serious. Our usual monitoring does not reveal much, because traditional monitoring was never intended to detect complex breaches. I developed a separate system, specifically for that." "What do you need from me, Greg?" he asked. He cleared his throat and continued, "We could really use your expertise, perhaps a phone consultation." "You mean you want me to advise on the security system you just decided was unnecessary?" "Nobody said security was unimportant," he answered sharply. "We are reorganizing how it is overseen." "How is that progressing so far?" I asked. The line was silent for a moment. "We are ready to pay your contractor fee for help." I smiled grimly. "My rate is $800 per hour with a minimum of 4 hours paid up front, plus a signed agreement confirming I bear no responsibility for the results." I expected him to hesitate, but instead he said, "I will have the contracts prepared." "How quickly can you begin?" I replied, "I cannot. I accepted an alternative offer, and a non-compete clause in my severance forbids me from accessing your systems, since I am joining another financial security company." This was untrue. I had not yet accepted another role, and the non-compete had exceptions for. I was doing consulting work, but Greg had no idea. "Mark, this is serious." I agreed. "It really is." I ended the call and switched off my phone once more. Whatever was going on at Nexora, it was no longer my concern. They had made their decision. The following morning, I checked the technology news sites out of habit. There was nothing about Nexora yet, but by midday the first headline appeared on a cybersecurity blog. Financial data firm Nexora Labs investigating possible security breach. My phone showed 7 missed calls from different Nexora numbers. 3 from Greg, 2 from James, 1 from Diane, and 1 from an unknown number. I listened to the voicemails. "Greg, Mark, we must talk. The situation has escalated. Contact me immediately." "James, it is bad, really bad. Someone has infiltrated the system and we cannot lock them out. Please return my call." The final voicemail was from Stephen Wright, Nexora's CEO. "Mark, this is Stephen. Whatever happened between you and Greg, we need your assistance right now. Our client's data is in danger. Please call me directly." I sat at my kitchen table. Coffee growing cold, 9 years spent building a security system, and it took less than 72 hours to be compromised after I left. Not because the system was flawed, but because no one understood how to maintain it. I returned Stephen's call. Thank God he picked up. Mark, we have a problem. I have heard, I answered. What is going on exactly? Someone is inside our systems. They have bypassed perimeter security somehow, and they are moving. There was a discussion about client databases, but they were unable to pinpoint how Greg mentioned something regarding the internal segmentation failing. The internal segmentation was my custom-built data isolation system designed to prevent lateral movement between client repositories. It was intended to automatically secure itself if it noticed any unusual access behavior. I asked if the autolock had been activated, but there was only silence. I said, "Autolock on," then closed my eyes. Stephen explained that there is an automatic quarantine system integrated into the segmentation controls. If unauthorized movement is detected, it should isolate each client database automatically. No one had brought up this quarantine system before. Suddenly, I heard quiet conversation. Then Stephen returned. Greg mentioned there was nothing in the documentation about such an auto-quarantine because the board had regularly rejected my requests to fully document the security systems. They called it an emergency custom solution when approving the minimal budget, promising to properly fund it later. That later never arrived. I said, "The system does exist. I built it 3 years ago after the ThreadBank incident." More whispered discussion followed, then Greg's voice came back on the line. He asked, "Mark, exactly where is this quarantine system? We cannot find it in any of the infrastructure diagrams." I replied it was not in the diagrams because it was introduced as an emergency fix during the security breach 3 years ago. The board had approved it as a temporary measure that eventually became permanent. "Check the minutes from the emergency board meeting," I said. In August, there was yet another pause in our observations. At last, the emergency security measures proposed by Lou received approval. However, no technical specifics were provided because the board was not interested in details. Their sole concern was solving the problem. I could almost sense Greg's irritation through the phone when he said, "Can you just explain how to activate it? It should switch on automatically." I replied that if it did not, then something must have been altered in the configuration. Greg insisted that nothing was changed. I paused and then suggested checking the scheduled tasks on the security management server. There was a verification job meant to run every 6 hours to ensure the quarantine system was functioning correctly. After a few moments of silence, Greg confirmed the task existed, but was turned off. I asked, "Who disabled it?" Already aware of the answer, Greg's voice dropped quietly. The task had been deactivated during the security restructuring. To reduce system overhead, scheduled tasks were consolidated. Essentially, they had dismantled my security system in fragments without understanding the interplay between components. Now, they were facing the fallout. While Nexora's nightmare was escalating, I received a LinkedIn message from Elaine Hudson, the Chief Technology Officer at Sentinel Security Group. She said, "I heard you might be available. We should talk." Sentinel was one of the leading security companies in the nation. I had long admired their work and respected their methods. The timing of her message was impeccable. Later that afternoon, we met over coffee at a small cafe in Pike Place Market. Elaine was direct and to the point. Information spreads rapidly within security communities. Mark's current situation is unfortunate. I took a sip of my coffee and admitted I was unaware of the details since I was no longer involved in the company, she acknowledged. "Naturally, but I'm aware of your reputation. 9 years without any successful intrusions is quite remarkable." "Until now," I responded. "From what I gather, the breach occurred following significant modifications to your security framework, changes you did not implement yourself." I did not inquire how she was aware of that, but understood the security sector was tightly knit, and news circulated swiftly. She went on to explain they were growing their presence in the financial sector and were searching for someone familiar with its specific challenges, someone who had developed tailored solutions and could oversee intricate security systems. The offer was very attractive. Twice my salary at Nexus, along with equity, plus leading a team of 8 security engineers under my supervision. The only condition was that I needed to start immediately. I mentioned that my severance package included a non-compete agreement. Elaine smiled and assured me their legal team had reviewed typical Nexora severance contracts. The non-compete solely applied to direct competitors and financial data services, not to security consulting firms. She emphasized that they were not rivals to Nexora, but possibly a service provider. Later that evening, while examining Sentinel's job offer, my phone rang again, this time from Nexora's central switchboard. "Hello, Mark, this is Diane. Have you seen the news?" I had not, so I opened my laptop and scanned the leading technology news outlets. The headlines were everywhere. It was now confirmed. Nexora Labs had suffered a significant data breach affecting clients. The financial services company Nexora experienced a devastating security breach that caused severe damage. Following the announcement of this data breach, Nexora's stock value dropped by 28%. When I inquired about the extent of the damage, Diane explained that the hackers had accessed at least 40 client databases before the company could completely block external entry points. The system was in complete disarray, and no one knew how to properly restore the security protocols. I asked what Greg was saying, but Diane replied that Greg was silent, fully occupied with continuous crisis meetings alongside the board. They had hired an outside cybersecurity firm to handle the incident response. This external team faced the challenge of interpreting my custom-built security framework, which lacked any documentation or prior knowledge. Although the external experts would eventually figure everything out, it would take valuable time during which Nexora's reputation continued to suffer. I expressed my sincere apologies, meaning it deeply for everyone impacted. Diane reassured me that it was not my fault and acknowledged my prior warnings. The following morning, I accepted Sentinel's job offer. By noon, I was sitting in their Seattle downtown office, setting up my new gear. My first task was to assist in creating a recovery plan for financial institutions that had suffered similar breaches. Later that evening, I received one last message from Stephen Wright. He said the board wanted to discuss bringing me back and asked what my conditions were. I chose not to respond since some relationships, once broken, should remain so. Instead, I sent my initial draft of the recovery framework to Elaine with the subject line, "Preventing the Next Nexora." 1 month after the breach, I had begun. I was just settling into my position at Sentinel when Bloomberg released an investigative report titled, "The Dismantling of Nexora, How Costing Undermines Security." The article revealed that Nexora's new leadership had deliberately removed critical security measures to accelerate development timelines. Internal emails obtained by the journalists showed that Greg had disabled essential security features despite clear warnings from the IT team. James was anonymously quoted, describing how my customized security framework was torn down without a full understanding of the consequences. The most striking revelation came from board meeting notes dated 3 years earlier, when I had requested funding for proper documentation and knowledge transfer of the security systems. This budget request was rejected for 6 straight quarters, being labeled unnecessary administrative expense. On that very same day, 3 of Nexora's biggest clients announced they were ending their contracts. Their press statements expressed serious concerns about data security practices and a significant loss of confidence in Nexora's security oversight. I did not have to watch the stock price to realize what was unfolding. LinkedIn told the story as Nexora employees began to update their profiles en masse, indicating a mass departure. Greg Phelan updated his profile too, now calling himself a strategic technology advisor. No company listed his time at Nexora. His stay at Sentinel lasted fewer than 3 months. At Sentinel, we started receiving requests from multiple former Nexora clients seeking information. During a consultation for security advisory services, I received a call from a client's CIO who asked if I had been involved in Nexora's security design. I simply replied yes. He said, "That's why we are reaching out to you." At first, I did not feel any satisfaction from Nexora's collapse. It was a company I had helped establish, now falling apart, and hundreds of talented individuals facing job losses. However, I felt a subtle sense of validation. Security was not just an expense to be eliminated, it was essential and fundamental. Half a year later, Sentinel had expanded its financial security division significantly. A large number of our new customers were former Nexora clients, and several of my previous coworkers had joined our group. James had become my lead security engineer, and Diane was in charge of our client relations team. Nexora itself had been purchased for only a small portion of its prior worth, mainly acquired for its customer base and technology patents. The company name was discontinued, and the security incident became a warning tale featured in business school case studies. I met Stephen Wright at an industry event in Vancouver, Later, we found ourselves alone at the hotel bar after the conference sessions ended. "No hard feelings," he said while raising his glass. "None," I replied honestly. "Business choices have consequences, some heavier than others." He nodded and said, "For what it is worth, I opposed those decisions but was outvoted. That's how boards operate." I told him, "Your new company looks like it is doing well." Stephen finished his drink and added, "Ironically, we are paying Sentinel 3 times your salary for security." During the consultation, I gave a faint smile. The expense of security is inevitably incurred either beforehand or after a breach occurs. Paying later is always costlier, Stephen told me while leaving. Greg arrived at Verdun and continued pushing their rapid action approach, saying, "Good luck to them," I responded. Back in Seattle on Monday morning, I entered Sentinel's office to find Diane awaiting with news. Verifin experienced a security breach over the weekend, and their chief security officer has called for urgent help. She inquired if I wanted to lead the effort, but I declined. "Assign the less experienced team as they need to build skills," I advised. That afternoon, I completed the onboarding papers for our new client, documents that were lucid, thorough, and carefully crafted. One section titled, "Understanding the Entire Security Framework," was crucial, as this forms the basis of confidence. My father had been correct about one thing. Career stability is less about the company you join and more about being the person who anticipates and prevents crises that most cannot even perceive.